Darren Silver. Darren will be leading Wild Rites, not once, but twice this spring.
The mirroring of the wild reflects my interior in a way that brings me into contact with myself. And that process is so deeply inspiring to me that I can see and experience a part of my interior through the way the light glistens on a river, through the bird song in the morning. And what that touches is inspiration, is truly life for me.
What's up, soul family? Adam Jackson here with another episode of the Sacred Sons podcast. It's a tradition. I think we can call it a tradition now. My brother Darren on the podcast, joining us just about every year or so, maybe even a couple times a year at one point. And gosh, it's something that we long for as human beings, the tradition of making traditions. And so it's an honor to welcome you here, Darren Silver. How are you doing, my brother?
Hey, brother. It's really, really good to see you. And, you know, when we first chimed on, there was a little bit of technology stuff and didn't get to fully drop in with you, but it's really good to see you, man. And out here in Colorado, and it feels like spring today. It really feels like spring. So in that shifting time, shifting into spring. Yeah, man, we're going to talk about it today. Let's talk about the seasons. Let's deepen into what this time means. And I'm here to announce that Darren will be leading Wild Rites, not once, but twice this spring. The first one is happening April 24th through 28th in Poetry, Georgia. And then headed all the way across the pond, May 8th through 12th in Wales, UK. For all of our UK brothers, for all of our European brothers, get to Wild Rites. It's an experience like nothing else. We're going to drop into it today. Please welcome Darren Silver. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, man, I'm feeling like spring too. And specifically, I'm feeling, kind of like that first breaking of ground from seeds that have been planted long ago. In my creative field, a lot of projects that we have been cultivating, that I have been cultivating in and around my life have started to break new ground. My daughter, Winona Lee Jackson, is here. She's a month and a half.
Beautiful.
Not only is she born, but we're through the postpartum portal as well. So it's like she's really, really here now. So that's kind of what I'm checking in with in regards to spring. Spring has sprung.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations on the new one into the world. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Firstborn daughter. It's a whole extra thing this time around.
Yeah. Huh. I'm curious about that. Maybe we'll circle back. How's it different?
I mean, listen, the love is the same.
Sure.
But the softness in these early days, the softness, the funny thing is she looks like me, which is what I wasn't expecting, like she actually has some of my features. So that's really been interesting too. And kids, their form and faces change so much in these early days, but I'm really seeing that reflection of myself in feminine form. That's very different. And my other kids kind of look like their mother, and so I'm seeing a bit more of myself in her, which is a very beautiful mirror to have reflected back. And it's been peace. She's calm. She's sweet. We're in the love. We're in this time. It's also been, gosh, Darren, the other three boys are in three different schools, so I'm driving the bus in the morning, doing the pickups, making the lunches. It's a lot of energy that way too. So full on is how I describe this time.
Beautiful. Yeah. I look forward to meeting him one day. I just missed him last winter, in Maui, because I left and then the next day you came in.
I know we're doing this ancient future village where the village travels too. And as Sacred Sons, we're going to be making more opportunities for just that, for our families to get together in the form of a gathering, but also just the opportunities in the in-between.
Beautiful. Yeah, right on. Well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. Yeah, man, what are you checking in with?
Wow. It feels like just emerging out of the past week and a half of some trying times and deep reflection. A very, very dear and close elder of mine made the journey to the great beyond. And it wasn't sudden. It was expected and quite deliberate in the final days. And when they're gone, it's a whole nother level of reality. And so I got to spend a good couple hours in the final days, and asking a lot of questions to him and laughing and memories. And then he passed. So a lot of community and a lot of coming together, and grief is there for sure in moments, a lot of celebration, and a deep, deep inquiry of our mortality and my life. And so it kind of brought me into a very inner, quiet terrain in myself. And there's movement there. It wasn't like I dropped in. It wasn't like a rock bottom. It was like a deep interior reflection of the brevity of life.
Yeah, what's being reflected back from that place. What I hear in that is giving death so much presence and intention, which is not largely the case in our current society, I would say. And so from that place of presence and intention with this death of your elder, what's the reflection that's coming back?
Yeah, and this isn't particularly a new idea, but he did dying. It wasn't something that happened to him. He approached it with consciousness. He approached that with questions. He approached that with having the conversations he needed to have, not in like a dramatic way, but to me and the personal things he said to me and many, many others. So the deepest reflection is one of them is a real tangible experience of dying being something that we can do and do well. And the second part, I asked this man, Adam, I said, are you afraid? And he said, no, I'm in awe. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of all of this life and all the treasures I got to unpack and all of the difficulties that turned into the treasures. And so it shifted something just to be able to openly talk. And what I noticed was, wow, this man has gone through so many initiations in his life that, or let me put it this way, so many little deaths that the big one he was really able to meet. Yeah, that's a big one. And of course, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I better get to work, because it could end tomorrow, And that's like surface, but it's there. It's kind of like, holy shit, this is not long. And yeah, and just a whole carriage fulls of love.
If you don't mind, I want to keep going down this road with you.
Yeah.
So if then you want to continue on, get to work in an attempt to participate in the act of dying well for yourself, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you in a lived experience?
Well, to some degree, every night we put our head on the pillow, it's a death to that day. And It's a threshold, just as it is when we wake up in the morning. And so, like, how much consciousness and something we all do we bring to those moments? And it can be a review of the day. It can be a harvest of our days. Wow, I'm getting ready to slip into another world called the dream time, or sometimes what I like to call it, night school. And, like, is there awareness at those thresholds? Awareness. And that's just on the daily. Just on the daily. I know Kale talks, and does greeting the sun. And I know I've heard him speak about that. I imagine he does the same with the sun going down. Again, it's those thresholds. How much do we really honor those thresholds of the little deaths that we experience all the time? And then there's the big ones, of course, which is what I'm so deeply passionate about, which is the little death that's experienced in wild rites. Or the moments when we deliberately sever ourselves from the everyday life. When we deliberately sever ourselves to have a conscious experimentation and conversation with the unknown, is an opportunity to consciously do dying. So that when it gets to the big one, we're familiar with its landscape, but we're also able to be tactful with the unfinished business that's there. So it doesn't all come at the last final days of like, oh my God, I have, one of my teachers said, like, you get to know the health of a community and how they respond to someone dying. And I've seen this in families, a certain type of community, and then the greater sense of community. When someone passes, there can be total chaos, and it makes evident unfinished business. And I've seen it be a total celebration. And it's like, it's indicative of how well we're meeting what actually is, truly. And a lot of the work that we've done in Sacred Sons, it's the confrontation isn't about confrontation. It's about truly meeting what is. And sometimes dramatically, sometimes softly, sometimes with rage, sometimes with grief, is unpacking what has been in the way of what is.
Something else we do at Sacred Sons is we grieve. We talk about grieving. We lead with grieving because it's an action that's largely been missing collectively from men, right? And that's maybe the presumption with which we approach some of this work. But what you called in was the celebration. I would love to like kind of lean more into that. It's like if the opposite of chaos is not order, but it's celebration. And in that celebration requires some order, right? And also the original remembrance, the rituals with which we celebrate too. Like, yeah, to be able to celebrate one's death is also like a rite of passage, especially in a time globally where we're present to so much death that's just happening, uncelebrated, unconsciously, with lack of awareness.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was it like on the other side?
Yeah. And one of my inquiries was I saw a man that lived generously. And what I mean that is like the fullness of himself was always there. Like a true spirit of generosity. Because of that generosity, what he did created a sense of it served something way beyond him. And so in his passing, there's the grief of his loss, but the celebration of everything he served is still here. And it's an invitation to really get to know what it was he was so truly in love with. Because that's what he was serving. And it's all still, he knew it was bigger than him, which is why and how I think he was so generous. And it's an open door for us too, or for me. and in my own unique spark and way of living what it is I'm in love with, generously, just generously. I wrote a poem some time ago, and one of the lines was, "There's no one to be when you belong. There's no one to be when you belong, other than yourself." And the belonging piece is so important. And this man carried that, this deep sense of belonging to the world. And so he could express the fullness of himself all the time. Yeah. That's the celebration. Yeah.
I resonate with this man. Did you care to name him just in the sake of this conversation?
Of course, yeah. I was just feeling that. His name is David Tressimer, and he was the founder of a place in Boulder called Star House, an esoteric temple that is...
And a home to yourself.
It was, yeah. I lived there for 5+ years, not in the temple, but in the house on the property. And that place is a cultural artifact, meaning it's a place that we can go that brings us into connection with everything else. Because of its geometry, because of its orientation, it holds this map of earth and sky, earth and stars. And it's magnificent. And he devoted himself in service of the temple and seminal work. Of bringing people in connection with, this is where we are.
Yeah.
It's an auspicious place, man. Here, it's a hard to find place.
Here where we are? This is the great mystery. I'm loving the word generosity, feeling into how generous not only life is, but how generous death can be too. In the way that you're speaking, because we don't often like come from the perspective of death having given us so much, but this is the infinite cycle. Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back, to the seeds that are blooming now from prayers of our past, as we're collectively building sacred sons, and as you are deepening into all of the work that you are doing. After a couple of years, Wilderness and Rites of Passage Guide, how is this continuing to unfold for you, this role that you play? It's one of the roles, right?
Yeah, it's a large one. It's been my passion for 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, Wilderness Rites of Passage contains, in the way that I approach Wilderness Rites of Passage, contains a few questions for me that I feel like I've been asking my whole life, and that I will thankfully never get the answer to. It's the question that keeps me moving and keeps my inquiry living. And thank goodness I don't get the answer, because if I got it, I'd get bored probably. And Wild Rites, I'll call that Google consciousness. What's the name of that bird? You look at it and then gone. But we all have these questions that we don't get the answers to. And so Wilderness Rites of Passage is one of those deep questions, or it contains some of the core questions that I live with. One of them is, what is vision? How do we live vision? Why is it important to live and have vision? And so how it's evolved for me, what's most present with me about Wilderness Rites of Passage right now is that it's implicitly relational. In other words, when I go into the wilderness, there is an ecology of communication happening all the time between the whole of life. And I feel in my interior, that's what's happening too. From very different and unique perspectives within me. And so the mirroring of the wild reflects my interior in a way that brings me into contact with myself. And that process is so deeply inspiring to me that I can see and experience a part of my interior through the way the light glistens on a river, through the bird song in the morning. And what that touches is inspiration, is truly life for me. And one more big thing I'll say is that I talk a lot about it. A lot of people talk about initiation. And I've often asked the question of like, initiated into what? Like, what are we being in cultures of old? If you're being initiated, it was really clear. You're being initiated into this role in the community. And these are the things that you have access to now because you're in that role. That doesn't exist today. And so it does to some degree, but it doesn't touch the deep places of the mysteries that we hold within us. And so when it comes to wilderness rites of passage, I have often found that one of the greatest things that I can contribute is that we're being initiated again into belonging to the place where we live. We're belonging once again to the earth. The absence of that is reflected in this time where the wild is being decimated, completely ignored.
You touched on it right there, but could you go into this? I mean, like, we have a lot of certification in this time, not initiation. We have accreditation. Like, you have accomplished this programming. We have a lot of programming and indoctrination. The wild, there's no indoctrination into the wild. It is crossing that threshold and therefore initiating into the wild. I would just say, when we talk about initiation as sacred sons in the terms of like an EMX or convergence, we're calling that initiation into men's work, into masculine alchemy, into this brotherhood, right? So there is that initiation for men that we're having some attempt to reclaim and to re-energize, right? To reactivate, because it belongs to all men. This is a part of the belonging.
Exactly. It's the belonging. Come into brotherhood.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this. You know how you'll know when it's initiation? When there's no certification.
Totally.
Now the certification, and I'll pass it back to you, but the certification might be the scars. The certification might be the vision. The certification might be that those blades of grass that you braided for 4 days.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You know, this is like a riff off of something I heard in an interview of Bob Marley.
Oh, wow.
And so it was an inspiration for me of hearing something he said. He did not say it like this, but that education without inspiration is indoctrination. He was talking about something, and that's what occurred to me. Man, education without inspiration is just indoctrination.
And the wild inspires. The wild inspires because it's wild.
Totally. And inspire means to bring the spirit within. You know? To inspire, to bring it in here.
Yeah, to breathe life into.
To breathe, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the wild does it, and it's my temple.
And so, like, you know, we've talked about this from different approaches, but maybe there's a brother listening for the first time here who's considering this. But why is it important to be initiated into wilderness, into the nature of ourselves through that relationship? You know, you're saying it's relational, right? And so why is it necessary for humans at this time to give some attention to that relationship? We give attention to many relationships, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, for thousands of years, there has been a relationship that everybody, but in this context, men have had with the wild. In particular, going to the edge or beyond the edge places to discover what it is they're made of. If we don't find that edge, if we don't step into the ring in some way, then the fullness of our capacity will never be lived into entirely. And so this can look a lot of different ways, but going into the wild touches edges within ourselves that can't be accessed elsewhere. Whether it's being alone when there's mountain lions and rattlesnakes and bears, that touches something in us that we have to find our courage and our surrender. We have to find our strength and our subtleness. And if we don't, then we're not living the fullest of our capacity. And that's what's most alive right now. I think on previous conversations and podcasts, I've talked about culture and nature. And, in my mind, true culture is a reflection of the place upon which a people live. And in times of old, the boys or the men were being initiated into culture. They literally stepped out of the mother's world and stepped into the father's world of culture. The mother's world being nature.
I just want to say here, you have previously said that women are informed by nature, men are informed by culture.
Exactly. That's
a powerful construct to come at this from. It's interesting.
Beautiful, man. Yeah. It is. I chew on that all the time. And I mean, we could riff on that for hours of how I feel it's impacted the relationship between men and women, and an unsettling mistrust that may be there because men, it was so important for them to be initiated into something that was a reflection of the deep feminine in the world. Maybe if we look at society today that actually is in total denial of the living and wild, beautiful earth, maybe, I don't know, maybe that has an impact on women. I certainly feel like it has an impact on men, that something deep inside of them knows that if they're contributing and spending their time towards destruction more than life, that there's a grief, there's a unpalpable, undescribable grief that resides in a lot of men. Yeah, that I feel connecting to the wilderness begins to bridge. Wait a second. The earth is living. I mean, that happens to a lot of men out there. They're like, I never knew how beautiful the song of a river was. I didn't know that, and it takes some days to wash out all the distraction, which is endless these days.
Endless.
Yeah.
As you're talking about this in the macro way, can we bring it into the home? The men creating the culture in their homes and in the communities. You know what I mean? For men who are caught up in the modern industrial society and maybe lacking some culture, how do we begin to cultivate culture from the home front? You know what I'm saying? Because maybe it's too much to change it for the whole world or for one group of people, but how do we cultivate that from within?
Yeah. Well, in Celtic tradition, they would say that the soul of a man is feminine and the soul of a woman is masculine. So perhaps some of the initiation for both genders, and we're just speaking two genders for right now, is to come into contact in some way in our interior with a feminine or masculine function. Bringing it into the home. I mean, I think that question implies a deep sense of relationality, a deep sense of leaving space within ourselves as men for the fecundity of the feminine to come through.
Fecundity.
I love that word.
Mean? What does it mean? I've never even heard.
For the richness of life.
Ooh.
To come through. Personally, I feel that as a man, that if I cultivate that within me, then there's a space for, on the external of us, for the woman, to be the fullness of herself too. And what exists within that in the home and in relationship and what that creates, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's tricky to, like, I reference what I view as like intact cultures as frameworks. But it's just a reference point. Like, we're moving towards something new that's being birthed that I don't know. But I feel like we have to cultivate those qualities within ourselves so that we can recognize what we're in relationship with. You know, if we're just hyper masculine and aren't in touch with the more feminine components of our interior, my sense is a woman's never really going to feel safe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that just kind of like blasted me with this idea, like when men are not in relationship with nature, not in a way to dominate nature, but to be confident in nature, that also might leak a little bit of fear energy. You know what I mean? Like to be in connection with the wild, to be willing to go into the unknown, is actually a very masculine trait, right? And so in that way too, it's required.
Yeah, it's required. And, you know, if let's just put it this way as a question, if women are informed by nature, and then we look to nature and see the incredible dynamism of communication and complexity of which nature exists to create life, then perhaps we can have an appreciation for the way that women bring life into the world. Be a little bit more in relationship.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oh man, that's powerful. Could you say that again? Say it again. Like, just
probably not, bro.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
Probably not. Yeah.
No, I feel that though. I mean, okay, so what I saw too, because mankind has tried to dominate nature, you know, therefore we've also lost the appreciation for it. Because we tried to harness death, because we're afraid of death, because we're afraid of that bear in the cave that exists, we've lost the ability to truly to appreciate life in the fullest essence, potential, you know, maybe, just maybe.
And, you know, biologically speaking, women come into contact with death in a very, very unique way through their cycles.
Right.
You and I have that in a very different way, you know? And so I mean, it's yeah. I mean, that's to me when culture becomes something really magnificent and there's a true weaving that happens between these great energies of the masculine and the feminine.
Well, I don't know if you're ready to hear this, but Sacred Sons, Convergence 9, Remembrance, we're inviting in the masculine and feminine to have a ceremony together. Oh,
wow. I didn't know that. And I'm ready. I'm ready.
I know that you didn't know. This is an announcement. I think I just announced it on this podcast officially. We're doing it. We're doing it in Washington this September. And so we're inviting in women to participate, to lead, and to dance in that ceremony. And there's going to be a lot of unknown. There's a lot of preparation that's already, we got some of the wheels turning. So for yourself, make sure to show up to the leader calls, the upcoming ones, so we can talk about it and invite in who maybe you would want to invite into. But yeah, we feel like it's, we put in the time to just, for this dance, open it up. And also what you were saying, for maybe for some of the women who are out there who see the work that Sacred Sons has been doing, and they go, I want not only to be on the fly on the wall, like I want to be in that. I want to be in that circle. I want to do some masculine alchemy healing work for myself, because it will be a held experience. This is not a festival by any means or anything like that, but it's a ceremony.
Yeah. In times when I have been in a container where women are able to witness men in their vulnerability, it often carries the potential of really deep healing. And vice versa. And oftentimes, well, I'll just say that what I've experienced is in those spaces, it's the men's grief and the women's anger. And for men to feel held and being able to witness and experience the anger there. It's not always this way. But those are some heavy things that in a relationship between two people, it requires a lot of resource and a lot of skill to address that. But in a group, in a container, it can be held and witnessed.
Held, expressed, experienced. And I would say, I agree with you. What I have seen is typically, and not to generalize, but when a man's coming in with anger, what's behind it is sadness. And when a woman is coming in with sadness, what's behind it is the anger that has not been expressed. So I also experience those inverses. And yeah, man, we're equipped to do that deep work together. And you know this. But
oh yeah. Yeah.
It'll be a big step in September. Darren, obviously you're invited. You're all invited. And more to come. But this is the remembrance. And I think you and I have even talked about this concept of remembrance, to remember, period. And Wild Rites is that too, right? It's like, it's connection, it's relationship, but it's not something that you're learning for the first time.
Yeah. Well, even the word remember is like to join again.
Yes.
And so that plays both internally and externally in Wild Rites. We are remembering parts of ourselves, to join again with parts of ourselves, to rehydrate, to fully inhabit. And then, of course, to remember our relationship with where we are on the earth. So there's a lot of remembrance that takes place in the process. And, there's old ideas out there of like that, those parts of ourselves, let's just say parts for now, that we forget. When we come back into contact with them, they're often a little bit hostile. Yeah.
Say more about that.
They're like, fuck you, man. You didn't feed me for all these years. You forgot me for all these years. And they come in kicking and screaming. They come in with buckets of tears. They come in with a lot of fuck this and fuck you and fuck that and fuck everything. And that's nature is always expressing what it is. And I'm speaking of nature broadly. This cottonwood tree is nearly always going to behave as a cottonwood tree. The kingfisher is always going to behave as a kingfisher. But we can lie. We lie about who we are and our nature, and that's the process of growing up, is to coming into contact with our true nature. And so when we immerse ourselves in a context that's constantly expressing what it is and who it is, then those hard to find, scared, angry parts, forgotten, that resides within us, finally feel safe enough to come out. It's not for everybody. That's where it happens for me. It's where I feel safest. And so there's this purifying process where who we truly are begins to make itself evident. And so it's confrontation in a different way. Because part of Wild Rites, we're alone. We're doing that work on ourselves. And we're being confronted by the night. We're being confronted by a rattlesnake. We're being confronted by a bear. I mean, all this stuff has happened.
Yeah. Or an old woman who turned into a deer. Go back.
Did I tell that story?
Go back to the previous podcast if you want to hear an incredible story. But yes, yeah, the visions are strong out there on Wild Rites.
Yeah, that one lives deep in my bones. Deep in my bones.
I wanted to say this. You said something interesting, which is we can lie. And when you said that, like we can lie, we can hide, it kind of rang for me. And I was thinking about, yeah, a cotton tree can be a cotton tree. But then there's animals who are predators and they have to hide. They have to hide their intentions. It's a survival mechanism, you know? And so humans, you know, just through, let's call it the evolution, we have also had to hide to survive. And what's interesting about it is now that we've hidden so much for so long, now we have to hunt again. But what we're hunting for this time is our true selves and who we actually are. It's wild. Like we took it so far that now the hunt is back to who we are.
Yeah, what comes up for me is this question of like, and this comes from, it's not an original idea, but like, are we a prey or predator animal? Or are we both?
Kind of both.
Kind of both. And so are we able to dance between the two?
Well, if these aliens show up, we'll find out pretty soon.
I don't know, man. On YouTube, it says they're already here.
Yeah. Well, if they reveal themselves, yeah, I mean, it might be more literal than we think. It has been more literal than we thought in the evolution of sapiens, right? You know,
yeah.
we were certainly like prey to each other. We're still prey to each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though we are top of the food chain, we're still killing each other at an immense, unconscionable rate. More so than anything that nature's ever maybe even designed. I don't know.
Yeah. And where I go with that, you know, is that that's an inability to reside in what is and an emphasis on what we think ought to be. So in other words, I'm going to start a war with you because you're not like me. And I will be at peace if you're more like me. All war is, in my opinion, rooted in the pursuit of peace. It's just distorted. You know? Like, I'd be so much more at peace if you weren't here or you acted like me, if we were just the same. Or if I can control you. Yeah. And again, this like weaves back to our previous aspect of relationality, that there is a dynamic of difference that actually comes together to create life. That's something to really deeply be celebrated, for me at least. Yeah, we're kind of traveling all over the place.
Yeah, well, we're all headed to death, so it's all good. Yeah. We're gonna circle back to death. So wherever we go in the conversation, it all counts.
But yeah, none of us are getting out of this alive, so we might as well just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I mean, I'll go back to it. That part earlier you were mentioning, you know, having the little death so it doesn't all pile up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not paying for our sins.
Yeah.
So when we go to the gates and when our soul is weighed, that it can be light as a feather, you know, as one of the mythologies kind of proposes. You know, I like to just come back to this dying well by living now, you know, and living now actually means letting go of time, letting go of functions even, or, you know, identity, and that like, yeah, really being here, really savoring it. That's what I've taken so far. That's what I'm really feeling today.
Yeah. Or what if part of our identity included the whole of life? What if part of who I am is also the river I'm in relationship with?
Yeah.
What if part of who I am is so deeply bound with the seasons and cycles?
Then that is truly something to be in awe of.
Yeah. Yeah.
To hold that awareness.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, how much choice does one have when they think they're only existing from one place in themselves all the time? One perspective all the time gives no choice. There's no choice in that.
Right, right.
And so to really honor that our identity can be a incredible tapestry of life gives us choice. And that's the beautiful thing about watching a predator like a mountain lion or a bobcat or even a hawk is the agility of which they move with in the landscape. It's not as much hiding as much as it is choice because of their impeccable awareness, you know? And, you know, they often move on the edges. Foxes are great at this. Bobcats are awesome to watch or track, that they're moving on the edges. You know, they're right there on the edge. So maybe it's a certain quality of energy that we need that informs us about what it means to be walking on the edge. And it's like, well, what's the edge for you? What does that look like? Where is the edge? It can just bring up so many questions. Yeah.
It's amazing that you framed it around choice. Because I just did a podcast 2 days ago, and that same sentiment came through, that, you know, the proof that it's possible, the proof of humanity is that we still have choice. The proof that we can create the reality, the world, the peace that we wish to experience. The proof is in the choice. And I think that is, and the choice is the edge.
Yeah. Yeah. There's choice as long as we're aware. A lot of people don't have choice because they're not aware of what's happening inside. Inside, in their internal, and or on the external. I mean, watch somebody that doesn't know. I don't want to sound judgy, but someone that doesn't have a strong connection with the land, they're blundering through the landscape. You know?
I've probably blundered a few landscapes in my day.
You know,
I trampled a couple plants.
Yeah, for sure. Jeans are torn up, and you know, versus someone who really does, and they're moving. They're moving as like one elegant prayer across the landscape. And they're on the trail and off the trail and weaving this way and weaving that way and looking down and looking up, looking sideways, and having a sense of focused vision and having a sense of expanded vision. So choice is critical. Choice is so critical. And you're right. You're right. I think we're a species of an enormous amount of choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that there's these two cats that come into our yard from the neighbor's yard. One's a black cat, jet black, really beautiful. Every time I see her, I'm like, I imagine it's good luck. And then there's a white, orange, brown, spotted, and they come through the yard every day. And I love to catch it. You know, I love to catch it in action. They're almost sneaking through the yard like they know they're not supposed to be there. But the routes they take, sometimes the black one even come up on my roof, go over this little trellis, climb down through these pathways that I don't see as pathways, obviously. But it unlocks like a new perspective of even the landscape of my backyard. Right. And then to experience that in other grand ways, in other ways when we get to reconnect with nature, just to understand what's possible. Because when you said like it takes awareness, yeah, you have to be awareness of what is actually possible.
Sure.
Otherwise, we're choosing from a limited perception.
Yeah, and it's really easy. I'll just ask a question to drop in there. Next time you see those cats, and maybe in the springtime there'll be more birds or something, track how the birds change their behavior, how their song or their movements may change, and then it's like, then it'll be. You're sitting in your house and you'll see the birds do something and you go, oh my God, the cats are coming. And then boom, they'll come around the corner.
Yeah. I was greeted with it was some type of a bird head recently from one of the cats. Sometimes they bring them to the doorstep in the front of the house. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Without awareness, it's real easy to assume that everything that's happening or experiencing in myself is the same that it is for you.
Yeah.
It's real easy to project on that if there's not a real clear edge of where I begin and end and you begin and end. And so, a fascinating inquiry is truly around even just talking about the edge, how close are you to your edge? Are you inside or are you way outside your edge? Some people hang out there and blow themselves out over and over and over and over and over again. And so, anyways, it's getting into a little bit of what we talk about in Wild Rites, is these teachings that are bound with nature, but also are internal.
Yeah. I want to say here, I think it's all useful. I think we need those adrenaline junkies who hang out on the edge. Like there was a usefulness to them in tribe, in society in some form. And we need those who hang back and who just hold down the kitchen from that firm place. Like we need the full range of expression, maybe for a cohesive human unit.
Totally.
Where we do get to blur the lines of where one ends and the other begins, because we are in such a relationship that it's not like codependent relationship, but unified tribe,
Totally.
I don't have that as a human experience. I touch it at Sacred Sons. I get to touch it on those team weekends, on those like intentional weekends or other types of experiences. And in my family, the family's tribe as well. But I was just going to say that you want to find the edge. Like these are the ways. You actually have to go out. You have to go out and do something that's beyond what you thought was possible.
Yeah. And also what I hear you saying is that there's not a right or wrong way to be in relationship with the edge. It's like, that's the beauty, is that we're all different. We're all different. And, but are we self-aware of where our edge exists?
Yeah. And its usefulness. For me, usefulness is a part of what we live for. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah.
Because therein is the belonging.
Yeah.
To be useful, to be received, to be seen, to be witnessed in it. And then also to receive and to witness and to keep that energy moving. That's what really feeds life. That's what really feeds life. Yeah. All right. Before I spin this out again, we'll bring this to a close with that. Darren, we're approaching our leadership summit. We're going to be hanging out here in Southern California before you know it. There's probably a bunch of guys on their way out there right now listening. With that, what message do you have for the Sacred Sons, for the brothers who are coming in, for the men who are finding their edge, reconnecting with the land, and on this journey with us? What message do you have for them?
This is just what's most alive for me right now, coming from our conversation. It's, it's real personal that I feel for me, I learned relationship and actually healthy attachment first through nature. I learned it through tending a fire for years, consistently. It's the place that I learned how to be in contact with life. So then, and that's my story. But there's men out there that are the same, that are like, man, how do I do this thing of participating with life? And, if you feel a call that nature is a resource and always has been for you, or that it was when you were young and you lost it, that it can be a place to come back into connection with the source of life in you and find how you're wired in your own way to be in relationship. And, nature is loving, sometimes fierce. The earth is deeply loving. It doesn't mean we don't get out there and get, thrown across the mountainside by a storm. But there's forgiveness there. There's not judgment. And so it can be a very powerful place to, there's this beautiful poem by Robert Bly, and one of the last lines is like, what if it's been decided that you have been forgiven, and that if you lay down, no one will die? And so stepping into wild rites is an opportunity to really sever ourselves, and we can lay down and surrender and trust that this great wild earth can hold us in our process. Teach us once again how to be in relationship with life, with creation. And men that are listening know, deep inside of you if you're called. And it's one of those things that is big enough, like a lot of what we do at Sacred Sons, that it's like there's a calling and you know it. And if this is for you, I will meet you there. I will meet you in that calling. And with anything with me, there's deep work and there's a lot of mischievousness and laughter,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's breaking bread, man. What are we doing all this for? Yeah, it's fun, It's fun. I was going to send you out there, Go meet a bear. It'll be fun. No problem.
It'll be fun. And if it's not, feel into why it's not. Have a vision while you're out there. Have a vision. Yeah, man. Beautiful. Thank you. It's awesome to create and to steward the tradition, and to keep it going. I also talk about belonging as having something to look forward to. And so I always look forward to these check-ins. I look forward to the times we get to come into contact together, and then also to continue putting out the call. Brothers, if you're that man, if it's time, if the wilderness is calling, we have these rites of passages. Mm-hmm. We have it now. We have it now, and it's something that I'm deeply grateful for. Yeah, in honor and memory of David Tressimer, thank you for bringing the generosity with your being. Yeah, I'm feeling into the generosity through death and the forgiveness of nature.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for bringing David in again. I would not be who I am without men like him. Yeah. And that's the beauty of community and why we need each other, is because often we can see in others what they can't yet see themselves. And he saw in me for many years what I couldn't yet see in myself. And I'm so grateful for him, and grateful for all the brothers out there. And you, Adam, and just so deeply grateful.
More to come.
Miles to go.
Oh, man. All right. With that, Wild Rites, Darren Silver, Adam Jackson, Sacred Sons. See you at Summit. We're out, family. Peace.